Coming up on today's episode of AMA Drone Report. Drone registration included in DoD authorization bill. Drones mentioned in Terror Advisory System Bulletin. And journalist jailed in Myanmar for using drones. Hello, I'm Laura Hudson. Welcome to Airborne's AMA Drone Report on Aero-TV, a weekly news program covering the recreational drone world in partnership with the Academy of Model Aeronautics, one of the oldest and most respected aviation organizations in the world, with more than 195,000 members and 2,400 clubs across the country. Well, you knew this was coming. A bill that includes a return to civilian drone registration has been included in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2018. It would again require the registration of drones weighing more than about half a pound with the federal government. Congress finalized legislation that will reverse the earlier court ruling in the John Taylor case and restore the FAA's UAS registration requirement, including for AMA members, said the AMA. We expect this legislation, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2018, to go through final passage in the House and Senate and to the President's desk soon. We ask all AMA members to please comply with the registration rule once it's in effect again. We will update you when this happens. While we have always said registration makes sense at some level, we have pushed for a more reasonable threshold and argued that if registration is to be implemented, the criteria threshold and implementation should go through rulemaking. We continue to work closely with Congress, the FAA, and other stakeholders to determine the best path forward now that UAS registration will be reinstituted. This process will take time, but as always, we are doing everything we can to advocate for our members and protect the model aircraft hobby. In the next Drone Minute, let's take a brief look at a few of the shorter stories that are making the rounds of the small UAS and hobby drone communities. DRL's drone racing simulator has gotten updated. The latest version has just been released. This is a hotfix release that addresses a bug that players encountered in training missions in Quest 1 and 2, because it wouldn't allow the sim to register player interaction with specific flags. The bug would make it impossible to complete certain missions. This is now fixed. Another multi-copter has grown up. Visitors to the 2018 Consumer Electronics Show will get a look at the SureFly personal octocopter under development by the Workhorse Group that was on display as a mock-up in the Innovations Pavilion at AirVenture in July. SureFly was first unveiled internationally at the Paris Air Show in June. The 20-year-old Pasco, Washington man who was operating a drone that impacted the top of the Space Needle in Seattle on New Year's Eve 2016 has been charged with reckless endangerment and faces a fine and jail time. Cole Kelly was operating the drone that impacted an area near pyrotechnicians who were getting ready for a midnight fireworks show to ring in the New Year's. The structure was undamaged by the incident. More than 1,000 pilots, athletes, coaches, and referees from 37 countries converged on Wuhan, China last week for the first edition of the FAI-ASFC World FlyIn Expo. The air sports extravaganza, which ran from November 4th to 7th, attracted some 300,000 attendees, including 100 exhibitors from general aviation companies and air sports organizations. The National UAV Professional Technical Talents Grand Prix and the Innovative Aircraft Challenge, which aims to encourage the development of new types of aircraft, were also part of the event. That was our Drone Minute. Now back to the rest of the news. Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Elaine has issued an updated National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin pertaining to the terrorism threat to the U.S. homeland. After careful consideration of the current terror threat environment and with input from intelligence and law enforcement partners, I have made the decision to update and extend the NTAS Bulletin for 6 months, said Acting Secretary Duke. This marks the 5th iteration of the Bulletin of the terror threat to the U.S. homeland. The Bulletin has been reissued 3 times previously since its initial release in December 2015. According to the Bulletin, some terrorist groups overseas are using battlefield experiences to pursue new technologies and tactics, such as unmanned aerial systems and chemical agents that could be used outside the conflict zones. Additionally, terrorists continue to target commercial aviation and air cargo, including with concealed explosives. DHS is asking citizens to report suspicious activity to local law enforcement who can best offer specific details on terroristic indicators. 2 journalists working for Turkish State media have been jailed in Myanmar for using a drone for filming. The 2 journalists, Cameraman Lau Hon Meng from Singapore and reporter Mok Choy Lin from Malaysia, along with their interpreter and driver, were sentenced to 2 months in prison for violating a local aviation law. The 4 were detained on October 27th while working on a documentary for TRT World. They were charged with flying a drone near Parliament in the capital. Initially, police investigated whether the 4 had violated an import-export rule, which could have landed them in prison for 3 years. The judge decided to charge them with violating the 1934 Burma Aircraft Act, which has a maximum sentence of 3 months. Both the reporter and cameraman pleaded guilty to the lesser charge, expecting to be fined and released. But instead, they were sentenced to jail. Their attorney said he would be appealing the decision to see if the penalty could be reduced to a fine. However, there is a new hearing scheduled on November 16th to determine if there was a violation of the import-export rule. Well, that's our program for this week. In addition to this program, our daily Airborne Unlimited episodes covering the entire aviation and aerospace world are streamed Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and tweet us. Get comprehensive, real-time, 24/7 coverage of the latest aviation and aerospace stories anytime at aero-news.net. And more information on the exciting hobby drone world at modelaircraft.org. We'll see you next week.